One of the fundamental promises of capitalism is that it's the best system to solve problems. And if you happen to be the one who solves the problems, you get to reap the upside. That's great. But the society ought to be able to say, hey, listen, you can't cause the problems either. Watch this week's rant. Let me know what you think.
Hi, Brant Cooper here. I'm fortunate I get to travel around the world speaking with startup founders, investors, ecosystem developers. I've learned a lot in my travels. I've got some stories, and I have some thinking that I love to share. Welcome to Brant's Rant. And my book is coming out. I've turned the manuscript in, still doing some revisions, tentatively titled Disruption for All. Probably late summer, maybe early fall release. And I'm really gearing up this year to get as many people involved in the discussion about those two things, really. The discussion about what is the desired outcome and what are the tweaks that we can make to the system in order to best get at those desired outcomes. And the book really tackles this from a business, a corporate perspective, because they are dominant players in that system. And in my view, they've really sort of lost their way in terms of, what is their purpose. And I don't really believe that they have to go off and do this social responsibility stuff, but they are in business to create products and services. And so they are in business to create value for other human beings. And they've forgotten how to do that. And they've relied instead on acquisition and governments that actually support their markets. So all of this crying about over-regulation is actually not true. Really, the corporates are the ones that design regulations in order to protect their market. And so we get into that a little bit. But basically, we just need to get the companies to refocus on creating value for human beings again. And then a lot of these other things inside of that system start becoming better. The outcomes improve. And so that's a big part of the book. But I also want to tackle these other areas of our life that we can apply the principles that I talk about. And that's nonprofits and startups and social impact entrepreneurs and education and how we change education, how we change government, the way government operates itself. And how we finance startups, even small businesses. And so there's a bunch of these other areas that we can touch on that I think gets to all of these different roles that we play in society, and how we can apply some of the principles that I discuss in the book to these different entities and organizations. And it's really a way for us to make change. And so the principles, you've heard me talk about them before, the 5 elements. Empathy. So it's understanding our customers deeply, but also understanding each other, and really taking this lead role in how we interact with other human beings. Exploration. So that's where we admit what we don't know so that we can go and learn again. Human beings, really, we're learning machines. We start out our life learning. We fall down, we get up, we try again. Remember, that was like the most often phrase we heard as kids, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And then by the time we're adults, oh man, we can't admit failure. We can't admit when we don't know. I mean, we just really teach that out of us, and we need to get back to that exploration mode. We use the evidence to inform our decisions. That's data and insights that we glean, and knowledge that the real experts in the world have based upon science and their experience and their domain expertise. And I differentiate between experts and pundits. So that's the third E. And then there's equilibrium, which is finding a balance in our life. Balancing all the things that we have in our personal life, but also in all of those different entities that I've discussed. It's a balance between execution mode and exploration mode. So we have to learn first and then we execute. And so whenever we're doing anything in the world, it's never one or the other. It's always a balance. And so we need to actively recognize the balance and then figure out what we're doing as a team or as a company or as an individual. How are we balancing the execution work that we have to get done and the exploration work so that we know what we need to execute on. And then the last E is ethics, and we really need to bring the ethics and the values back into our daily lives and into our work lives. It's super interesting to see the corporations that have declared that they're going to stop funding any of the politicians that supported the insurrection. And number one, I'm sort of wondering why these companies are giving money to politicians at all. I think that should just stop. But I also think it's an indication that there are portions of our companies that go off and do those things and they're not checked by the values. And make no mistake, these companies are giving money to the left and the right and everywhere in between. They're throwing this money out there regardless of the values that are being supported by that money. And so maybe they should just stop. As a matter of fact, I think that they should just stop. So these are the 5 elements. I have ideas on how organizations can roll this out. There's 4 phases. Kickstart phase, which is, don't do a ton of planning. Here are some ways that you can get started right away. The accelerator phase, where you're doubling down on what you've learned and what works while doing some of the planning on how you're going to roll this out. The scaling phase, which is starting to build these mechanisms that force the behavior change and protect the behavior change, as well as the scaffolding that's starting to build these structural elements around the behavior that you want to see. And then the endure phase is really when the leadership steps away and the scaffolding is taken down, or the scaffolding actually becomes part of the organization, that the behavior is the natural outcome of the way the company is now organized and structured. That's obviously a long journey. But I think that there's ways to think about each of those phases that one can get started in, or that what you have in place you can leverage in order to take the next step. I fundamentally believe that all of these changes are eventually going to happen in government, in education, in business, and in these other organizations that I talked about. So we might as well get started. And I know that people out there are wondering what it is that they can do. There's a lot of the behavior that goes on inside of companies today, that in organizations today, that are the right things. There is sort of the empathy work. There's the agile structure and agile principles that I think are really important. I sort of roll my eyes a little bit at the agile structure because we want to get away from worrying too much about rigid implementations of agile that sort of crush the spirit of agile. And so when I'm talking about agile, I really mean the empowerment component of it. The giving smart people a problem to solve, and the accountability and the resources to solve it. They will go solve it. And so we build structures that support this agile way of thinking. And then we need to build these layers of that structure. And so you go from agile teams to this layer, which I call stream of streams, similar to McChrystal's team of teams, but it's really around the communication flow. When you have agile teams that are out on the edge and the sort of the grassroots level of the company, they're producing the insights and the data and the knowledge and the know-how. And so that information needs to go up to this layer that sort of is the communication hubs, and make sure that that is spread horizontally across the organization, as well as up the stack to leaders. And likewise, there's other information coming from different parts of the organization, as well as priorities and guardrails and missions coming down from the layers of hierarchy, and then go back out to the teams. So it's important that the stream of streams is not a bottleneck. It's not that all of information flows in that way. It's more of a management layer of understanding how to take in information and what they need to do with it in terms of setting teams' ambitions and metrics and those type of things, as well as ensuring that the information is being communicated and heard and followed up on. Obstacles are overcome, issues are raised. So there's a sort of different type of management that happens in these middle layers. It's no longer the you do what I say. It's me understanding what the priorities of my group are and how do I leverage all of the resources, the teams, and the knowledge of and abilities of these other parts of the organization in order to make sure that my division is doing all it can, but also that it's a cohesive part of what the larger mission is. And so these middle layers are the ones that really can best understand all of the contextual elements that are going on inside the organization. And so it's super interesting, I find, because I struggled for a while to try to find what is the role of middle management, and sort of there it is. The hierarchy is less deep, but there still is the requirement for that. Hey, thanks for listening to Brant's Rant. If we're choosing capitalism here as a society, then let's make it work for a better world. If you'd like to join me as we redefine capitalism for the 21st century, go to beatcoop.co/D4A. Also, if you have a pressing issue that you're facing in your innovation group, your product group, your startup, and want to join me on video, see the link below. Subscribe, like, see you next time.